Jai Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Reading from Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita. This is the Adi Leela, chapter 17, the pastimes of the Lord in his youth. And today we're starting at text 155 through to 157. Kaji kahe tomara vaiche Veda Purana Taiche Amara Shastra Kedava Korana Kaji kahe tomara ya iche Veda Purana Taiche Amara Shastra Ketava Korana. Kaji kahe. The Kazi replies, Tomara, your, ya iche, as much as, Veda Purana, the Vedas and Puranas, Taiche, similarly, Amara, our, Shastra, Scripture, Ketaba, a holy book, Korana, the Quran. Translation and purports by His Divine Grace Srila Prabhupada. The Kazi replied, as you have your scriptures called the Vedas and Puranas, we have our scripture known as the Holy Quran. Please repeat. The Kazi replied, as you have your scriptures, called the Vedas and Puranas, we have our scripture, known as the Holy Quran. Purport. Chand Kazi agreed to talk with Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu on the strength of the scriptures. According to the Vedic scripture, if one can support his position by quoting from the Vedas, his argument is perfect. Similarly, when the Mohammedans support their position with quotations from the Quran, their arguments are also authorized. When Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu raised the question of the Mohammedans' cow killing and bull killing, Chand Kazi came to the standard of understanding from his scriptures. Text number 156, translation. According to the Quran, there are two ways of advancement, through increasing the propensity to enjoy and decreasing the propensity to enjoy. On the path of decreasing attachment, nivritti marga, the killing of animals is prohibited. Text 157, translation. On the path of material activities, there is regulation for killing cows. If such killing is done under the guidance of Scripture, there is no sin. Purport. The word Shastra is derived from the dhatu, or verbal root, shas. Shas dhatu pertains to controlling or ruling. A government's ruling through force or weapons is called Shastra. Thus, whenever there is ruling either by weapons or by injunctions, the Shas dhatu is the basic principle. Between Shastra, ruling through weapons, and Shastra, ruling through injunctions of the scriptures, the better is Shastra. Our Vedic scriptures are not ordinary law books of human common sense. They are the statements of factually liberated persons unaffected by the imperfections of the senses. Shastra must be correct always, not sometimes correct and sometimes incorrect. In the Vedic scriptures, the cow is described as a mother. Therefore, she is a mother for all time. It is not, as some rascals say, that in the Vedic age she was a mother, but she is not in this age. If Shastra is an authority, the cow is a mother always. She was a mother in the Vedic age, and she is a mother in this age also. If one acts according to the injunctions of Shastra, he is freed from the reactions of sinful activity. For example, the propensities for eating flesh, drinking wine, and enjoying sex life are all natural to the conditioned soul. The path of such enjoyment is called pravriti marga. The Shastra says, pravriti esham bhutanam nivritis tu mahaphalam. One should not be carried away by the propensities of defective conditioned life. One should be guided by the principles of the Shastras. A child's propensity is to play all day long, but it is the injunction of the Shastras that the parents should take care to educate him. The Shastras are there just to guide the activities of human society. But because people do not refer to the injunctions of Shastras, which are free from the defects and imperfections, they are therefore misguided by so-called educated teachers and leaders who are full of the deficiencies of conditioned life. Amagana timanandasya gananjana shalakaya chakshu unmanitam jena tasmai sri gurave namaha. I was born in the darkness of ignorance, and my spiritual masters very kindly come, forced open my eyes with the torchlight of transcendental knowledge. I offer my most respectful obeisances unto his lotus feet. So this last sentence or two of Srila Prabhupada's purport, I'll just repeat it. But because people do not refer to the instructions of Shastras, which are free from the defects and imperfections, they are therefore misguided by so-called educated teachers and leaders who are full of the deficiencies of conditional life. So when I read that, I thought we have one very dear senior godbrother, Trivikram Maharaj. Some of us may. He joined Srila Prabhupada's movement. He was a little older than most of everybody else. He was 26, and this was in 1969. And he was completing a degree in sociology at university at the time he met Srila Prabhupada. Of course, he was Trivikram Das Brahmachari back in those days, and for many decades now, Maharaj. But Prabhupada asked him, what is this sociology? And Trivikram said, well, Prabhupada, we study problems in society like alcoholism and how to cure them. And Prabhupada said, oh, I see. So the professors lecture the students all day, and at the end of the day, the lecturer says, that's enough for today, let's all go and have a drink. And Trivikram said, yes, more or less that's what happens, Prabhupada. So, therefore, misguided by so-called educated teachers and leaders who are full of the deficiencies of conditional life. And of course we know those are subject to illusion, imperfect senses, propensity to cheat, and I can always get 3 out of 4. Subject to illusion, imperfect senses, cheating propensity, and making mistakes. Thank you. Yes, Ram Prasad. So, whereas Shastras coming from the all-perfect Supreme Lord and his empowered representatives, they're free of those four imperfections. And of course, I think it is the very second verse of the first canto of the 18,000 verses of Srimad Bhagavatam, Dhamma kaitavotra paramo nimatsaranam satam. Completely rejecting all materially motivated religions, this Bhagavat Purana propounds the highest truth, which is readily understandable by those devotees who are pure in heart. This absolute truth can upend or uproot the threefold miseries. So, Kaitava Dharma, there are many cheating religions. Srila Vyasadeva is unapologetic in pointing out materially motivated religious systems. He rejects all of those as Kaitava Dharma, cheating. And another interesting, which I'd never heard before, pastime of Srila Prabhupada's, he told one time, he had a friend, a very good friend in Prayagraj, when Prabhupada had his Prayag pharmacy there. This friend of Prabhupada's was a doctor, and he was prescribing a number of Prabhupada's pharmaceutical products to his patients for different ailments they were coming to the doctor for. And one man came, and Prabhupada describes him as Eurasian. Not a word we hear so much anymore. I think now the terminology is mixed race. But back in that era, Prabhupada refers, meaning this man, European and some Asian parentage there, Eurasian. So this man came to the doctor, and the doctor diagnosed him and said, this is your problem, and here's the medicine. And it was one of Srila Prabhupada's medications. And he gave it to the man, and the man looked at it and saw that it was made in India. So he said, I'm not taking this. He had some prejudice, some bias against anything made in India. So the doctor became very angry with him and said, well, why are you wasting my time and your own time coming here? I've diagnosed you. This is your problem, and this is the medicine. And now you're refusing to take it just because it's made in India. And he said, get out. Go. Don't ever come back. So Prabhupada told that story one time. And he used it to reference, don't waste a spiritual guru's time coming to him, inquiring from him about why we're suffering in this material world. And when he gives us the prescription, chant Hare Krishna, do some devotional service to Krishna, hear about Krishna, associate with devotees and so on, we say, oh, I don't want to do that. So you're wasting his time, wasting your own time. Medicine, in most cases, it's not required that we know how it works for it to work. We take it on the advice of a qualified physician, and it has its effect. So similarly, we may not know much in the beginning of our devotional spiritual lives, the potency of the Hare Krishna mantra, for example, or the efficacy of rendering some service to Krishna. But if we just do it with a little bit of faith, we see it has miraculous effects, wonderful effects. And we continue, and we get a taste. There's a wonderful morning walk conversation, very early days in Prabhupada's India preaching. Just a few devotees were along on the walk, somewhere in India. And Prabhupada questioned them, how can we tell if we're making spiritual advancement? And the few devotees along on that morning walk gave a number of different replies. Prabhupada dismissed them all until Yadubar Prabhu suggested, we can feel it, Srila Prabhupada. And Prabhupada said, that's it. We can feel it when we're making spiritual advancement. Our attachment to the mundane slackens, and we're getting a taste that we've never experienced like anything ever before. So we can feel it. So the proof of the pudding is in the eating, most definitely. So we're going to resist the temptation to jump ahead. I'm not sure who's giving class tomorrow. Tomorrow, I think, is the 1st of September, and Daksha Prabhu's still working on the class roster. It's a work in progress, Prabhu, yes. A few changes there. But anyway, we resist the temptation because Mahaprabhu will, in following verses, use the Shastra and very good logic also to defeat the arguments of the Kazi. But I'm not going. That will all be revealed tomorrow, whoever the speaker is for tomorrow's Chaitanya Charitamrita class. But there's certainly plenty in these purports of Srila Prabhupada's to speak about, and in this relative world that we're in, there is often a misconception amongst theosophists that bhakti is somehow or other meant for less intelligent, emotional, sentimental folks. That's a common misconception. That the real yoga is jnana. But Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who is the Supreme Personality of Godhead himself, he defeated the different arguments of Prakashananda Saraswati in Varanasi, who was challenging this young, supremely attractive sannyasi who'd come from Bengal, Sri Krishna Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, when he said, your business is to study Vedanta and to meditate, but I see you're chanting and dancing ecstatically in the company of others. This is really not the business of a sannyasi. And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu responded to him famously that my spiritual master considered me a fool. He said, you're not qualified to study Vedanta. And he gave this wonderful he actually quoted, first of all, the famous Harinama verse from, I think, the Brihat Naradiya Purana, which of course many of us know. Harinama, Harinama, Harinama eva kevalam, kalo nasteva, nasteva, nasteva gatiya anyata. Just chant the holy name, chant the holy name, chant the holy name. There is no other way, no other way, no other way for spiritual advancement in Kali Yuga. So things that are very emphatic and really want to be stressed in the Vedic literatures are often mentioned 3 times. And then he went on to instruct Ishwarapuri instruct Lord Chaitanya, Nachagayo Bhakta Sange Kara Samkirtan, Krishna Nam Upadeshi Hara Savajana. My dear child, because Ishwarapuri was very elderly, continued chanting and dancing in the company of devotees. Furthermore, go out and preach the glories of Krishna Nam for the benefit of everyone. So Mahaprabhu, he relayed this to Prakashananda Saraswati, that this is the order I received from my Gurudev, so I'm simply following that order. But of course, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was the greatest scholar, being the Supreme Lord and Incarnation, Krishna himself. Vedaischa saveraham eva vedyo vedanta krit vedanta vid eva chaham. By all the Vedas I am to be known. Krishna tells Arjuna, indeed I am the compiler of Vedanta, as Srila Vyasadeva, and I am the knower of the Vedas as well. So the Lord did go on to have a profoundly philosophical conversation with Prakashananda Saraswati. And at that time, Prakashananda Saraswati and his many sannyasi impersonalists followers actually surrendered to Lord Chaitanya and became his followers. That conversion took place. So, and I was thinking also, Srila Prabhupada did not hold back, it's fair to say. The word Pashugnat is mentioned in one verse in Srimad Bhagavatam. It means a killer of animals and also the killer of oneself, in the sense of committing spiritual suicide. It's a very heavy statement. It's those who are, of course, addicted to the meat-eating propensity. It's very difficult for them to make substantial spiritual progress. It's like a block, a roadblock in spiritual life. So, of course, it's one of the... Prabhupada did not actually come to the Western world to teach sub-religious principles, such as vegetarianism. He very much wanted to teach the sublime teachings of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and he did. And even as early as December 1966, we can all listen to those lectures. I have an ant here, everyone. I'm just going to give him a little change of location. There he goes. Hare Krishna. As early as December 1966, recorded, sometimes referred to as the Vintage Series. And Prabhupada did try earnestly to pass on the very esoteric and profound teachings of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu right from the very beginning. But of course, for some of his early students and the general public, those teachings were a little high. So Prabhupada, and on many other occasions, did lecture from Chaitanya Charitamrita, but as a general rule, he would teach from Bhagavad Gita for newcomers to spiritual life, and Srimad Bhagavatam. But there are some interesting room conversations and history. But just before we get to that, on that point, there is one conversation Prabhupada had where he was scathing in the lifestyle habits of monks and nuns who had adopted vows of celibacy but were still meat-eating. And not only that, especially in the Western world, were using alcohol. Prabhupada explained that both, and even in India, he kind of reserved more intense criticism of so-called swamis and renunciants in different orders of spiritual life in India who had taken up the meat-eating practice. But in the West, he said, according to our Vedic principles, non-vegetarian foods are very difficult to digest. So people do use alcohol to help digest those heavy meat foods. So he said it's impossible from our Vedic standpoint to be celibate if you are ingesting those type of products, because that will produce so much rajas, so much passion in the body, and tamas, ignorance. Very difficult to maintain vows of celibacy, consuming those type of foods. So Prabhupada explained that even from Ayurvedic standpoint, what to speak of from spiritual standpoint. It's very displeasing to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, to God, and his pious representatives. And it's unnecessary, it's detrimental in so many different ways. So, and Prabhupada met with many different spiritual teachers who'd come from India, even before him, in the early 60s. And some of them were actually teaching yoga in different forms, and also encouraging people to become vegetarian. One of those was Yogi Bhajan. And there's a couple of conversations we've listened to of Prabhupada speaking. And Yogi Bhajan was very respectful to Prabhupada, and Prabhupada was equally respectful back to him. Has anybody ever bought a packet of yogi teas? Herbal teas? Yeah, okay. there we are. So that was Yogi Bhajan. He started that business when he came to America. He was teaching different yogas, and he was very entrepreneurial, and he started, and still going today, Yogi Teas. So, but Prabhupada explained to him that there are some great Vaishnavas who aren't vegetarian. Yogi Bhajan had said, look, I think I've somehow or other convinced 1 million people to become vegetarian, and that was quite a commendable feat back in the 1960s, and Prabhupada, that's very good. But Prabhupada also pointed out there are some great devotees of the Supreme Lord who aren't vegetarian. Anyone can think of one or two? Not Arjuna, but one of his brothers. Bhim, yeah. Bhim would eat anything. Yeah, so he's one example, but there's another great. Garuda, thank you. Yes, Garuda. Garuda eats snakes, and sometimes fish. He carries Lord Vishnu on his shoulders wherever they go. Yeah. So Prabhupada kind of pointed out in that way. But all right, let's go back here. No. So, we just had wonderful festivals, everyone. Janmashtami, Prabhupada's Parents' Day. Radhastami is the next big festival. Such a wonderful festival, Radhastami. Hare Krishna. We were doing a little bit of research, or just trying to prepare for Radhastami, reading as much as we could, 10th canto. Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur has written a wonderful book. It's called Sri Chaitanya Shikshamrita. Shiksha, we all know, means instructions. Amrit, nectarian. It's only a smallish book, about 180 pages, and it's considered one of Thakur Bhaktivinoda's most important works. It's actually a distilled essence of this whole Chaitanya Charitamrita. And towards the end of the Sri Chaitanya Shikshamrita, Thakur Bhaktivinoda lists all the different asuras or demons that Krishna liberated, and he links them to different aparads and also anarthas, which we have to give up one by one in our spiritual development. It's very instructive. And it's interesting, this word aparad, I recently learned, in both modern day Hindi and Bengali, it means a crime. We refer to it generally as an offence, yeah? So crime, offence, same, Bhavi is acknowledging. So I'll take it. She's fluent in at least half a dozen Indian languages, so along with English, any others. Okay, here we go to... Now there's 3 demoniac characters who were siblings. Okay, perhaps some of you know. But I won't pose too harder questions this morning, everyone. I can. But the first was Putana. Okay, she was the sister. And she represents the pseudo-guru. And then we go to, a little bit further along, we have Bakasura, the stork demon, cunning, duplicity, deceptiveness, and false types of behaviour. So Bakasura was Putana's brother, and then straight after him we have Aghasura. And Aghasura, the snake demon, cruelty and violence. So these are all very horrible traits which we all want to offload. So Thakur Bhaktivinoda, he compares those like that. And definitely worth getting rid of. I also read a nice pastime. I'm sure we're all familiar with Kubja. When Krishna and Balaram came into Mathura for the first time from Sri Brajadam, they were going like on a tour of this magnificent city that they'd never been to before. And on the way they were meeting different personalities, servants of King Kamsa. And one of those was Kubja. And Kubja has another name, Trivakra, I think, something like that, which means her spine was curved in 3 places. So she was a hunchback. She was a young lady. And she was very much attracted to the 2 transcendental brothers, Krishna and Balaram. But she was on her way to King Kamsa's palace with chandan, sandalwood pulp that she'd just ground, and also an array of exquisite perfumes to offer to the king. But being stunned by inattractiveness to the 2 lords, she offered them to them, and Krishna was very pleased with her offering. And he placed his lotus feet on Kubja's toes, and with a deft little flick of his wrist under her chin, straightened her up and transformed her into the most exquisitely beautiful. She was already beautiful. And being smitten with amorous love for Krishna, she invited him to come to her home, and they could enjoy one another's company. So Krishna said, yes, I will certainly come, and in fact he did go later. But he said, right now I have some important business here in Mathura I have to attend to. So that was the wonderful story of Kubja. And does anyone, this is a really hard question, Hare Krishna. But Kubja actually appeared just like the Dandakaranya sages and also some of the monkeys back in Lord Ram's pastimes, Krishna as Ramachandra. Kubja was also there in those pastimes. I can give some hints, but anyone like to guess who Kubja might have been during Lord Ramachandra's exile? We'll put it in the forest. She came on one occasion. She was the sister of Ravana. Shurpanaka, correct. Well done, Prabhus. Fantastic. More khichdi for you at breakfast. She was Shurpanaka, yes. And in that life form, she became smitten with the handsomeness of Lord Ram and very much wanted to enjoy with him. And the famous pastime is there. Ramachandra saying, my dear lady, I'm sorry, but I'm already married. And I've taken a vow, even though I'm Yuvaraj, prince, regent, the future king of Ayodhya, but I've taken a vow, Eka Patni Vrata, just to accept one wife in this incarnation. But my brother Lakshman is here. He's alone in the forest. But Lakshman was already married. His wife stayed back in Ayodhya. Dasarath Maharaj married all 4 sons at the same time. But Lakshman didn't very much appreciate his older brothers because Shurpanaka was hideous. She was an evil witch. And then, of course, as we've said before, Shurpanaka became very angry towards Sita. And at that point, I think it was Lakshman who had to draw his sword and cut off her ears and nose. But then she came back. Yeah, she came back in Krishna's as Kubja. So wonderful. And of course, many of the monkeys, and some of them gave up their lives in the great battle for Lanka, fighting on the side of Lord Ramachandra. They came back as the celebrated monkeys of Vrindavan. Prabhupada refers to them as in the Krishna book. So these wonderful pastimes are there to relish, and one thing we all have to do is protect. Some of us may have a little money in our bank accounts, not much. We may have a few material possessions we're trying to take care of. But the thing we really have to protect is our ruchi, our taste for hearing and chanting about Krishna. That's our most valuable asset. That's what we really have to protect. And we do have to protect it from these anarthas, unwanted material desires, and of course aparads. And those aparads can of course take many forms: seva aparad, offences we commit doing service, or nam aparads whilst we're chanting, guru aparad, very serious, Vaishnava aparads, offences to devotees. So I'll finish. I think I've got time. Interesting pastime, and that is in the modern world, speaking of philosophers and different spiritual paths, Prabhupada said that Socrates was the first and the last of the great Western philosophers. And Socrates' most famous disciple was Plato. And Plato wrote down a lot of the sayings of his mentor, Socrates. Very instructive. One of them, that Socrates had a male disciple come to him once and ask about marriage. He said, "Socrates, I think I want to get married." And Socrates said, "By all means get married. If you get a good wife, you'll be happy. If you get a bad wife, you'll become a philosopher." Of course, ladies, it's the same. If you get a good husband, you'll be happy. Get a bad husband, become a philosopher. So no harm. But Socrates did tell, and Plato wrote it down, the myth of the cave. And that story is quite famous, how once upon a time there were prisoners, and it would appear that they had been imprisoned in this cave since childhood. And they were chained, and they could only see the back wall of the cave. And there was a little light coming into the cave, and what was being projected on the back wall of the cave were the images of people and animals going past, but they were just the shadow reflections, just as we all experienced as children, reflections projected onto a wall at night time. So that's all they could see. But then one day, one of the prisoners managed to break his shackles and escape, and he went out. And the first thing that happened when he went out of the cave was he was just blinded by the sunlight, the dazzling sunlight. But once he got adjusted to that, he saw, there's a whole nother world going on out here. These images we just saw projected on the back of the cave, they're actually real persons and real animals. And there's a whole nother beautiful world out here going on. So he went back inside the cave and he tried to release some of the other prisoners and say, "Come outside, there's a wonderful world out there. It's beautiful." But the other prisoners weren't interested. They were so conditioned to life in the cave and just seeing the not illusory, but the reflected images. They wouldn't go. So that, of course, is the business of liberated, exalted devotees who come from the spiritual world and attempt to enlighten us conditioned souls that there is another place, there is another realm, the spiritual realm. And some of us hear that message and become attracted and want to go. And of course others, no, I'm going to stay here in the material world. Everything's okay. So I'll stop here, everyone. Thank you. Hare Krishna. Any questions, comments, or corrections? Ram Prashad, I don't know if we have a microphone free this morning. Thank you.
In the previous verse 156, I guess it is. And it says, according to the Quran, there are two ways of advancement. Through increasing the propensity to enjoy and decreasing the propensity to enjoy. And I know, I'm not saying you're an expert on the Quran, I don't know anything about it, but it seems strange that one of the ways of advancement is increasing the propensity to enjoy.
All I can say is, on that matter, is that sometimes we burn ourselves out. And many of us, by the time we joined Srila Prabhupada's movement in our late teens or early 20s, we were already pretty burnt out materially. We'd done everything that there was to do, and that was... And of course, so that is there. And Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur would often quote Bhoga Chaga, and he'd repeat it several times. Bhoga means enjoyment and Chaga means renunciation. So we enjoy, and then we become disgusted, frustrated, we renounce. It's just like people work hard all week and then on Friday night, Saturday night, they go to parties or they go to the bar and they get intoxicated. And the next morning they wake up with a throbbing headache, a hangover, and they go, I'm never going to do this again. So that's the renunciation. But then the next Friday or Saturday night, where's the parties, where's the bars, and they go and do it again. When we bought the Christchurch Temple in 1983, it was formerly a boarding house with a lot of different interesting characters living in it. And some of those were followers of a former Indian guru who did actually espouse this of just enjoying like anything to the point of where you become so disgusted you actually become renounced. And part of their so-called sadhana was on some afternoons they would get out in the backyard of what became our temple and do primordial screaming, where they would just let out all of the negative emotions, all the anger and frustration by screaming. And of course that was very disconcerting to the neighbours. So when we bought the temple, my wife and I, we went to all the neighbours and explained that look, don't worry, we do make a little bit of noise, we do use music, but we'll keep it to a bare minimum until everybody's sort of up around 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock in the morning. And we did. And we double glazed the windows of the temple room. We got the thickest curtains we could to muffle the sound. And we only played a little pair of cartels and Mangalarati because we were in a suburban environment. And they explained that this was the history of the primordial screaming going on the and the sign attached to their motel. This wasn't the motel owners in particular were very concerned about their business because they had a sign attached to their motel, the quiet one. And people would come from all over the South Island and other parts of the world and the North Island to stay on holidays, and they would hear this primordial screaming going on. So they got used to our kirtans after a while, and it's still going on. Hope that answers. Hope something in there was helpful. Anything else, anybody? Or we can...
Actually, you quoted Socrates and Plato.
Yes.
One of Plato's famous sayings was about this sort of enjoying to the max. He said, so what will you drink when you're choking on water?
Yeah. All right, Krishna Kirtan's got a finger up in the air. Yeah, sure.
With your permission, a very quick comment.
Sure.
I've heard another meaning for aparad. Maybe you can confirm, or we know the word apara means separate or separated, and radha, so when you come in aparad, you become separated from Radharani's mercy.
Okay.
Have you heard that meaning?
I have not heard, but thank you for sharing that with us.
Aparad.
Become separated from Radharani's mercy, by committing offences. That's I'll definitely. Everyone caught that? Okay. All right, thank you for sharing that, Krishna Kirtan Prabhu. I did have something, and you've just kind of had it here. Just very briefly, everyone. You have a yoke, and you have bullocks. Krishna Kirtan has 3 yokes. A single yoke for a single bullock, and he has 2 size yokes, one for the smaller bullocks, and then a big yoke for the big bullocks. He was telling me all this the other day. I was inquiring. Because you have to put the 2 together. Yeah, you have to put the yoke on the bullocks, and then it all just... So similarly, we have to, and we all know yoga, the word yoke comes from yoga. So we have to get together the Jiva soul and the Supreme Soul through Bhakti Yoga. So I'll leave it there. Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Gaura Prem.